Good morning. I've come to a piece of the Foreshore I have never been before. I have gone west, young man, and I'm in the company of Tobias.
Hello, Richard.
And you can see Tobias is a metal detector, so his hit rate on small metal finds is going to be 1,000,000 times better than mine. So what are you hoping for this morning from this stretch of the Foreshore?
Well, yesterday I met up with Nick White, and I wasn't hoping for good finds, but I had a good find. I had a Roman coin yesterday.
Oh, that's very good. Yeah.
So probably today I'm going to say I'm not hoping for good finds. Maybe I will then find good finds today.
Yeah, let's hope so. Yeah.
But just the company of Professor Richard Henry is a bonus. So anything I find today will be very interesting.
Oh,
anyway.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Let's hope we find good pottery. That's the main thing.
Yeah, let's see what we can find.
Today is a pottery day.
Okay, thanks Tobias. It's a bit of post-medieval red ware, a bit of yellow glaze, a handle probably sat horizontally on the vessel, large vessel. So difficult to date this stuff, 16th to 19th centuries, but a nice find. Here's a bit of tile, a bit of a heart stopper, because I thought for a moment it might be tin glaze, but I think it's Victorian knockoff because it's set into mortar or concrete. It's very thin, so I think Victorian rather than 17th or 18th century, but worth adding to the finds bag. I'm delighted to say that the bit of tile is not Victorian, but is actually tin glazed earthenware and is actually 18th century. It threw me a bit because it's on that sort of concretey base, but you can see that that's just where it was set into probably a fireplace, I would think, and you've got the buff coloured clay, which is the usual tin glazed tile clay there, and it's a half tile, so it would have gone along the edge of a pattern, as I say, probably a fireplace. They were still ripping these out at the beginning of the 20th century, so easily could have got into the river there. So that's the original width, and then it's missing a little bit at the ends, but actually it's a rather nice find, and it would have looked something like this, these floral half tiles, half the width of an ordinary tile. So a nice find in the end.
Again, it's a good spot for rings here.
Oh yeah, be nice to find those. It's a bit, I don't think it's very old, but it's a nice colour, nice design, probably a teapot lid. I'd say it's Victorian, sort of multi-glaze thing. Interesting. This is another part of the same thing, which might mean it's really very modern, unless it's just hasn't travelled very far. I've never used a metal detector on the Thames Foreshore. I used to have one when I was a boy. It was fairly successful. Found a few Roman coins. You've got to obviously have a good discrimination here because there's so much iron, nails, especially in the city of London, where you had a lot of shipbuilding and industry. So a small coil is definitely better to pick up those non-ferric finds. Speaking of metal finds, that's part of the battery there. People often wonder what they are, but I've heard it's something to do with the cell of a battery. There's several crossing points in this part of the Thames which go back to Celtic, that's pre-Roman times, and so things are thrown from bridges or dropped from bridges, or the current deposits them because it slows down as it goes past the piers of the bridge. So we shall see what turns up around here. Tobias has just picked up an old button pin. Do you think it's made of pewter or glass?
No, it's not a button actually.
Oh, it's not a button?
No, it looks like a button from the...
Oh yeah, it did, didn't it?
yeah, but it's not, I think.
Oh yeah.
Oh, what is that? It might be the top of
Top of a medicine...
a medicine bottle, Victoria.
Tube. Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, where you can squeeze out.
Yeah.
And you'd have this top that threaded onto the...
Yeah, and we might have some decoration there, or maybe some wording.
So it could be brass or lead alloy, maybe.
I would have thought so. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, a buckle, a D-shaped buckle. If it was small and brass, I'd say it was medieval, but it's probably more likely to be a horse harness.
I would have thought so.
Yeah, probably Victorian.
Yeah.
Anyway, for me, that's quite good. I'm not good at finding metals. Yeah, the foreshore here is a bit different from central London, where I go. A bit more regular, a bit more stony, but plenty of finds. There's the base of a ginger beer bottle. Does it have a factory mark on it? No, I can't see anything on that. Oh, there's another one there. That's the shoulder of a ginger beer. Again, no markings. It's incredible to think that these were all hand thrown, millions of them in the Victorian period and up to the 1940s, I think. All handmade by potters. Roof tile, identifiable by, not in the shape of course, but 2 holes where it would be attached to the roof rafters. Now, here's a bit of military history that Tobias has just detected. It is actually a live bullet, probably a .303 calibre, I would think. They normally have markings on the base, but with a live bullet. So normally we throw these into the deeper part of the river. We wouldn't take it home. So I will do that now. Yep, off it goes. Right, having disposed of live ammunition, let's see what we find. There's a small cog there, maybe from a clock, some sort of machinery. Right, what's it got? Glass bottle lid. Ooh, shell, nice scallop there. Plant pot, I would guess. The inevitable plastic, so we'll put that in our bag. Oh, there's a nice top to a ginger beer. They have that very distinctive tops to them, so that's quite nice. Victorian, up to about 1940, starting at about 1860. That one from its shape, probably the lip of a flagon, a straight-sided liquid container, beer, spirits, that sort of thing. We're going 1860 to 1940s. Stoneware. This bit has some nice decoration on it. I guess it's stoneware, but I've never quite seen a pattern like that before. It reminds me a bit of the Derbyshire stonewares, which had rouletted patterns around the belly of the pot, so I think that's what it is. Probably Victorian in age. Here's another stoneware ginger beer bottle, but this has got a mark on it, which is quite nice. So I think it's Denby Patentees. So that's going to be mid-Victorian in date as well, but I think I'll keep that just because of the mark. It's rather nice. That one, nice green glaze inside and a white slip outside, made in England. So this dates from after 1891, where it was required to put the country of origin on pottery for export. So after 1891, so probably an Edwardian lump of flower pot, I guess, nice for someone's conservatory. Another huge section of chain here. We're raising out of the foreshore, I guess, for attaching a ship to something vast. A reminder to be careful of your footing. There's some very soft mud here, and I don't think you could walk across that bit very easily. Another ceramic find, very industrial. This is an electrical insulator, late Victorian or 20th century. and it's a substantial bit of stoneware, or I'm not sure if it's a hard porcelain, too big to take home, sadly.
So here we are with Professor Richard Henry. Hi Richard.
Hello Tobias.
So yeah, according to Richard, he really thinks this could be a deer antler. Agree?
Yes, it's very nice because, as you say, it looks like iron, but it doesn't respond to iron on your metal detector.
No.
In which case it's likely to be prehistoric.
It is, yeah,
Right,
it could
yeah.
be. The reason I spot that, because a few months ago I found a very similar one, but maybe three times the size of this one here. And this little thing here was a giveaway, the inner bit.
Yeah.
And also
The
obviously
core.
that, yeah. And also I found just literally a few minutes ago this part of Bartman.
Yes,
maybe? Yeah.
salt glazed stoneware, as you say, for a German import from a large jug.
And this little nice Delftware, agree?
That is, yes, a beautiful rim from tin glazed earthenware with hand painted cobalt decoration in very good condition because it's such a fragile glaze, so it's chipped off the edges. But
Yeah. Okay, Richard, what have you found?
we found a nice bit of slipware. You can just see by the scalloped edge that it's the edge of a baking dish, and it's got that sort of Bakewell tart where they've combed or feathered the slipware. Yeah, they feathered the slipware to produce that lovely design on it. This stuff was made in Staffordshire from the middle of the 17th century, but also in London up to about 1830. Places like Isleworth made it, but yeah, a nice bit of baking dish there, and then a bit of green glazed ware, which is going to be just post-medieval. It could be 17th century or even 16th century, it might go back that early. Very nicely glazed inside and out on reddish clay, so I think that's what would give the hint that it's post-medieval. But yeah, there's some nice finds in this spot.
We did see something very similar just a few minutes ago somewhere over here, didn't we?
We did.
I think I can just
here
see
it
it.
is,
Yeah, there you are.
So it's another bit of slipware, but it's got rather a plainer design. It hasn't really got a feathered thing on it, and it's got a little snail which has taken root in it. But the same thing exactly, a baking dish, anything from the 17th century up to the 19th century.
And it's slightly different from the first one you found.
Yeah, only in decoration, in purpose, and where it was made and when it was made, very similar. I suppose the plainer pieces are more likely to be Victorian.
And they would have been very large plates as a decoration or as a
very functional kitchenware. So it would be like a sort of large oval, maybe up to that big, but just for baking in the oven. So yes,
not only for decoration purpose.
Oh yeah.
So they use as a dish for.
Oh yeah. These you
Sunday roast
found
or
these
something.
in pride of place in museums, but in their day they're very humble, domestic, utilitarian pottery that would be sold to all classes of people just for use in the kitchen.
Okay. And Richard, I think I can just about see something here that you might be interested in talking about there.
There's this
Which
bit.
is, yeah. What is this?
Well, it is a jawbone with teeth, and it's got a large canine at the front, so I think we're probably talking about a dog jawbone.
Yeah, okay.
I think it must be a large dog. Obviously they're dogs and hunting dogs, very common in all periods.
It's difficult to give it an age.
Very difficult,
Because
yeah.
unless you
it
go
might
for
be Victorian, it might be prehistoric. I'm not a bone expert, but someone would confirm that would be obviously a hunting animal rather than a domesticated animal like a sheep or a cow or a pig.
Brilliant. Okay, Richard, so we have a little bit of nice bits there. So where are they, these ones?
Well, we've got two nice pieces of tin glazed earthenware, which is known as Delftware. One very similar to the piece that Tobias found earlier. Yeah, there we are, you see. Yeah, very much in the same style with just concentric rings and then a sort of undulating hand-painted design in cobalt. But yeah, these would date from 1650 to about 1770, so that's quite a nice early find. But this bit is interesting as well. It's also a rim, it's also tin glaze. You can see the glaze is very fragile and it chips away from the edge very easily, which is why they couldn't use this for hot liquids or anything, and why eventually it got superseded by stoneware and by pearlware and other forms of harder pottery. But this is undecorated, and they did make quite a lot of undecorated tin glazed ware for very utilitarian things. I guess this is probably the rim of a chamber pot, so a very humble item. And then going forward a bit, some nice stoneware. We actually found these two bits separately, but they do join together to give a nice profile with some rouletted decoration of a very nice bowl.
Can you turn it sideways, Richard, please? The other way, so you can show the rim.
That way or that way?
This way, yeah.
So that's rather a nice bowl with rouletted decoration. This would be made in the Midlands, either Nottinghamshire or probably Derbyshire, the end of the 19th century and through the first part of the end of the 18th century and the first part of the 19th century. But it's very thin and beautifully made, beautifully decorated. So I'm very happy with that find.
Brilliant. Okay, Professor, so we've got more finds there.
Yeah, there's plenty of finds to be had around here. We've got a bit of porcelain. This is probably going to be Chinese export porcelain, which came into Europe in huge quantities via the Dutch East India Company in the 18th century especially. So that's got a very simple blue painted decoration. A bit of stoneware, decorative stoneware, so it's got some nice impressed decoration around it, probably Victorian. It looks like a very Victorian style.
Oh, what have you found there?
There's a couple of bits of transfer printed earthenware, refined earthenware. So this is made from the 1740s, and then from the 1760s they started to put transfer printing on it. That's a sort of flow blue where it's sort of merged into the glaze a bit. This was after the 1830s and that, but there's some very beautiful designs made in this stuff right through to the present day.
Richard, I've just literally found this
yes,
clay pipe here with some, I think it looks like Prince of Wales.
It has. It's got the Prince of Wales feathers
Yeah.
on it, and there's other bits of decoration which I can't quite make out. But I think that's probably going to be an 18th century patriotic pipe, you know, sort of around the wars of succession and stuff in Europe about the 1750s. They made a lot of pipes with the royal coat of arms on them, lion and the unicorn, and the Prince of Wales feathers is another very patriotic motif to show your allegiance when you were smoking.
I've got more finds there, Richard.
Yeah, we have a nice little pile of finds the Thames has given us. A very nice pipe with the maker's name on it. So one side says Burns and the other side Cutty. And a Cutty is a shape of pipe where you can see the shape. It's a Victorian pipe, but I've only just noticed that it's got actually holes in the inside, you know, to improve the smoking quality, which you don't get on earlier pipes. So that's rather nice. And the famous ship, the cutty sark, that's the same word, you know, the cutty, the sailor's pipe. Quite a short stem, so you could grip it in your teeth and smoke it there. So that's really nice to have that on it. And then a much older pipe, well, two old pipes actually. Okay, got nothing there.
Yeah, was out of focus, but it's okay.
Two much older pipes. When tobacco first came into this country, it was grown in America and imported across the ocean, and it was very expensive. So the bowls of the earlier pipes, you can see, are much, much smaller than the later pipes. So this would be the beginning of the 17th century, beginning of the 17th century, and sort of the end of the 17th century. And you can see that they get larger as the century goes on. And then if we compare with an 18th century pipe, they're much bigger. Tobacco got cheaper. And then pipes in the Victorian period get a bit smaller again, just for reasons of practicality, I think. So sometimes these will have maker's mark on the heel. Sadly, there's nothing on these ones, but sometimes get initials of the pipe maker or a device on the base of the heel of the pipe. But it's nice to get back to the 17th century, the time of the English Civil War and the very start of smoking in the UK.
Right, those are interesting pottery now. Do I see a crown there? Yeah, I do, yeah.
Yeah, this is very much, you know, the Thames foreshore is lined, the banks are lined with different clubs and cafes, and so you get this china with logos on, the Cabins Limited, London, that's the maker's mark, real china ironstone A Brothers, with a Victoria, the Queen shaped crown, so that's going to be Victorian, and again that, coffee and PA, I'm not sure, coffee and papers, coffee and something, but that's got also the Queen's crown on it, so that's going to be Victorian. But a lot of this sort of tea and coffee saucers and plates were thrown into the river when they got broken, so they're nice to find with the logo on them. You can do some research and find out about the business.
It looks like you have some more combed Staffordshire.
Yep, more of the slipware.
Slipware.
Baking dishes. Some with plain slipware and some with, that's a very particularly nice piece Tobias picked up, with the actually sort of rather more elaborate design in the slip. Not just pure feathering, but actually a sort of mottled design. But very nice. Probably 18th century, I would think, that particular one.
And I think there is an offering there. Offering?
Oh yeah.
It looks like it, doesn't it?
So yeah, someone's bracelet, it says "My Life" on it. And you know, for some reason and some cultures, they will often leave things in the river, especially the Hindu culture. There seem to be a lot of offerings, statuettes, and sometimes they'll burn incense in bowls or leave bits of silver or jewellery as an offering to their gods in the river. So that's an interesting find.
And I can just see a very interesting there in the right middle here, and also this one with the.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that? Richard?
Yeah. So this is red clay, but you can tell it's not been fired to a very high temperature because the surfaces have oxidized and turned red, but the centre, the clay, has remained that colour, and the heat hasn't really penetrated through the whole clay. So this would have been wood fired and probably at an earlier date. So this would be either medieval or Tudor normally, because after that time their technology improved and they were able to fire their tiles, probably part of a tile, all the way through and have a consistent red colour to the clay. So a grey core is normally an earlier sign of manufacture.
Right, okay. There's an interesting window there.
Yeah, now that part, you know, a lot of the transfer printed is quite poorly made, if you like, not very well coloured. But this is probably an earlier piece where actually it's very clear, the detail on it. So I mean, this could date from around 1800, and it's quite a thin piece, so maybe a mug or a tankard.
It looks like one of those Venetian windows.
Yeah, it does.
The post-medieval period.
Yep. Yeah, so that's definitely a better quality bit of transfer printing, a bit earlier.
And what's this one here?
That, I think, is part of a stoneware jug. So during the middle of the Victorian period, stoneware had a great resurgence, and there are a lot of very highly decorated jugs with floral motifs and animals and medieval scenes and knights and every sort of device you can think of. And that looks like it's leaves and a vine there. So that's again a nice bit of mid-Victorian stoneware, probably from a jug.
Right. And I can just about see the top of a Bartman
Which is
rim
here,
and the
yeah.
neck there.
That's right. Tobias was saying he has found a whole neck here with the bearded face on it. This is just the rim of a bottle. So there would have been a bearded face below it, and that's probably still in the river somewhere. But it's nice to find, this would date back to about 1550 to 1650, so it's quite an early bit of German stoneware which had been imported in full of wine and then used to serve wine and other alcohol, probably beer as well in this country.
Right, okay.
So historic find.
And finally, Richard, there is a yellowish kind of rim towards your knee there.
Oh yes, this one.
What's that one?
Yeah, this again dates from about 1800 to 1900, and it's Sunderland type slipware. So it's a very thick, creamy slip which is glazed just on the inside. And this would be used for things like milk bowls and dairy items, for the kitchen. Very humble type of pottery, very widely used across the whole country.
Hi Richard.
Hello,
So
Tobias.
what else have you got there?
Well, we've just spotted what looks like
Tide's
nice-
coming in quite fast.
Yeah, it is actually. We have to be on our way. A mother of pearl button, which is quite nice. London is famous in the East End for its pearly kings and pearly queens, but quite often buttons were made out of mother of pearl. Just
That
to
looks
show.
in perfect condition, doesn't it?
It is. It's really been sitting
So
there
that's
for
definitely a keeper.
100 years or so. So that's nice. Yeah. And a few other bits of pottery, which Tobias picked up. A bit of tin glazed earthenware. It would have been very white and very blue, but it's got a bit stained from being in the river. But there's a nice hand painted design on it, which is quite good. And it could be an ointment pot or something small like that. And then that's had a sprig on it, so they've pressed a shape into the clay, like a leaf shape, in a separate metal mould, and then they've put it onto the surface of the pot and then glazed it afterwards as a separate process. So that's interesting. That's probably Victorian, I think. But this one's earlier, 17th or 18th century. So it's quite a nice find there from the Thames. This is one of the last things we found on the foreshore before we went up the steps. And it's transfer printed, but it's a rather unusual shape. If you can see, at first I thought it was a handle, but it doesn't have that really handle shape. It doesn't work as a handle. But it's got like a cup above and a cup below. So I think it's an egg cup, a double-ended egg cup, which would make it probably Georgian or early Victorian. So if you imagine the whole thing, you could have your egg on it that way up, or equally, if you've got a slightly bigger egg, then you could have it that way up. But it's a beautiful bit of decoration and quite nice to find nearly half of it.
Can I give a close-up of the decoration?
Sure, yeah.
Again, it's a very nice tone of blue, isn't it?
It is. It's.
Do you think the tone of a colour gives the approximately the period of the of the find. For instance, that blue was very similar to the one we found earlier.
Yes, that's right. I think the deeper blue was popular at the beginning of the 19th century, and then it seems to get paler and less well made as the century draws on. But this is a quality piece. You know, I can easily see this on the table of a well-to-do Georgian or Victorian family.
Excellent, thank you.